I'd like to call this regular council meeting to order. Before we proceed any further, Councillor McDermott, I'd ask you to give the land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We acknowledge that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe people. We are the beneficiaries of ancient agreements such as the dish with one spoon between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agreed to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. The two-row wampum by which the Haudenosaunee welcomed the settlers and agreed to share the land in mutual respect, and the Treaty of Niagara, considered a fundamental document by First Nations in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous people, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experience of the Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the land on which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Would you all please rise for the invocation?
We meet to serve our community and endeavor to be worthy custodians of all that has been entrusted to us. Let us be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chambers minds that think and hearts that feel, so that in our deliberations we may display imagination, wisdom, and courage, and the will to do our work for the good of all.
Thank you. The roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Your Worship, Councillor Dubanow is absent and sends his regrets. The remainder of the members of council are present.
Thank you. There's no addendum this evening. There's just a couple of brief announcements. I want to comment on the conference, the Rural Municipalities of Ontario conference that the CAO, Chris McQueen, and I attended last week. We had an opportunity to meet with 7 ministers or parliamentary assistants. 4 ministers included Sylvia Jones, the Minister of Health, and we delivered to her during what I thought was a very, very constructive meeting our message that we need our urgent care center and we need to expand its hours of operation. We also had an opportunity to meet with Minister Jill Dunlop. She's colleges and universities and colleges. That's particularly important because in Fort Erie, Sheridan College has now begun offering training programs in Fort Erie for foreign students. They're doing that through a partnership with Canadian College of Trade and Technology, and they have plans to expand that. It's rather timely because the federal government has recently announced some restrictions on visas for foreign students, and that may have an impact on this particular program. But insofar as Sheridan is delivering programs that are needed, skilled jobs that are needed in Fort Erie and Niagara and really Ontario, we're hoping that they'll be able to obtain an exemption. We've indicated that we'll provide them with our support and advocate on their behalf. We also had an opportunity to meet with the Minister of Economic Development, Vic Fideli, and the Minister of Infrastructure, Kinga Surma, both of whom we're quite familiar with. They've been in Niagara. Minister Fideli has been in Fort Erie, will be coming back soon. And we had an opportunity to talk to them about some of the things that are happening here and some of the challenges that municipalities meet in their drive to fulfill the province's mandate to build 1.5 million homes over a 10-year period. That has infrastructure implications, not just water and sewer, but also things like schools, health services, etc. We then had an opportunity to meet with the Parliamentary Assistants for Finance, Natural Resources, and Transportation, and we touched on issues relevant to Fort Erie with all of them, including the third point of access and egress relative to Douglastown as it is growing. Certainly need that particular point of access. So all in all, it was a particularly fruitful conference. I remember one of the first conversations I had with Councillor Lewis after he was elected in 2022 was, do we belong to Roma? And indicated that we hadn't. But it turned out that's a good conference, and hopefully in years to come, other members of council will be able to attend that and participate in those meetings. The other announcement that I wanted to make is Big Brothers and Big Sisters is again having its annual Bowl for Kids' Sake. This year, it's being held on Tuesday, February the 27th in St. Catharines at the Parkway Social. And the fee to enter a team is $300. That's for teams of 4 to 6 players. I think we keep winning the trophy, so I'm hoping that there will be a team from Fort Erie that will participate and help to raise funding for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And I'm advised, I haven't confirmed this personally, that the CAO has indicated he'll help to sponsor a team. Is that correct? Okay. Whether it was or it wasn't, I guess it is now.
Force a hand.
So it's a great organization, and we have a long history of supporting Big Brothers and Big Sisters, so I hope that we can get good participation in that. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest this evening? There being none, we've got some upcoming public meetings and open houses. The first is an open house with respect to 409-423 Walden Boulevard. That's a proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. That open house will be held on Tuesday, January the 30th, which is tomorrow at 5 p.m. here in the atrium. We have hopefully a final budget meeting scheduled for this Wednesday, January 31st. We'll be dealing with the public library's budget and our assessment analysis and general levy operating budget. If all things go according to Hoyle, we'll be dealing with the final budget bylaws on February the 26th, 2024, which is the next regular council meeting after this evening. We have a public meeting with respect to a draft plan of subdivision and draft plan of vacant land condominium for 576 Ridge Road North, which is the old Ridgeway High School, Ridgeway Crystal Beach High School property. That meeting is scheduled for Monday, February the 12th, here at 6 p.m. in the council chamber. The information report will be available on our website by 5 p.m. on Thursday, February the 7th. And then finally, we have a visioning workshop with respect to the new official plan that we're working on. That workshop takes place February the 27th, 2024, from 5 to 7 p.m. at the Fort Erie Leisureplex. I presume that's in the banquet hall, and everyone is welcome. That takes us to the regional councillors report. Good evening, Councillor Encina.
Good evening, Mayor Redekop, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Only 6 pages tonight.
No.
Double spaced. Last week, I had the opportunity to listen and speak with Mr. Ian De Jong, the author of the book of Ending Homelessness, at a special meeting at Public Health and Social Services Committee. As many are aware, Mr. De Jong is a recognized international leader in finding ways to overcome homelessness in our communities. He explained how several societal issues have helped manifest the housing problems, even though at the region we have added over 130 new shelter beds. He believes that staff shortages, the rise of encampments, the lack of government support, senior government support, and legacy issues like healthcare and mental health are playing a part in the whole big picture. He did mention that regardless of the number of shelters that we build, there will always be a percentage who will remain on the street. Mr. De Jong agreed that the region's bridge housing program, that is in Niagara Falls and soon to be in St. Catharines, that's coming soon, is the way to go. Excuse me. I did mention to Mr. De Jong that all of these avenues that we are pursuing in all the municipalities come at a cost. They require funding, and I don't believe that the region and municipalities can ask the local taxpayers to pay any more, especially when they are provincial and federal government issues. He did note that in many studies, there is no correlation between shelters, where they're located, and property values. So I just wanted to put that to rest if councillors happen to come up with that. Mr. De Jong suggested a shelter liaison person to inform the communities. The reason I brought this up is that currently in Fort Erie, we do have people living rough. I would ask that if you know of anyone, or if you would talk to your constituents about it, have them please call 211. The Niagara Region Outreach Team will actually try and make contact and get them on the list. On a different note, Niagara Parks is looking for individuals who would like to join their team. There will be upcoming job fairs the next 2 months. They're looking for close to 1,200 people if anyone is looking for employment. They can go to the niagaraparks.com job fair. And one of the good things that they also noted was that the bridge out in Black Creek will be completed in April. All fingers crossed. At our last council meeting, regional council meeting, council approved the zoning for the extension of the Port Colborne Quarry. The Walker brothers had asked for it to extend the pit eastward towards Fort Erie on Highway 3. There were several issues related to this, as many in Fort Erie were aware of. There's the aquifer that extends from Port Colborne all the way through here. Questions were asked of staff as to who was going to monitor the underground stream to ensure wells will not be affected. Also questioned about the blasting that will be done in the area. Are we going to turn into another Sudbury kind of issue? We were assured that everything has been done, due diligence was done, and the province would be monitoring. And I believe the mayor said it correctly. I'm not sure if I wholeheartedly agree with the province doing the monitoring. That remains to be seen. That's all I have for this evening.
Short 6 pages. Any questions of the regional councillor? Thank you very much, Councillor Encina. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Councillor Encina. There's a recent announcement by the region regarding waste collection of the bags and compost that there was not going to be an increase in the fees this year, almost boasting about that they were keeping the line and not showing us an increase. However, the region is no longer picking up the gray and the blue boxes, which was paid through that same fund and the same taxes collected before, the fee collected before, which I understand is approximately 12% of this budget. Rather than telling us that they're not going to increase it, I think they need to explain why there wasn't a decrease, considering they're no longer doing a large part of the program that they did before. People are doing it. There's companies now that do it. I understand it came from a provincial level that it's I wouldn't say the consumers. Those people who are producing the waste are now responsible for picking it up for the blue box, and that to include.
Your question here, Councillor Noyes?
Yes. Basically, why was there not a decrease to reflect the decrease in the cost of doing it?
Thank you for the question through you, Mayor Redekop. That was one of the questions I've had and continue to have. From what I understand and what I recall, they're going to mention that the increase in the collection, whether through GFL or through Miller, costs have gone up. What we were advised was that several years ago when the contract was put out to tender, the lowest one was, and then we had problems. It wasn't market rate, market value. Now we're actually having to pay the market value. I would agree with you. I don't believe that, one, there should have been an increase or an attempted increase. And two, where's the money? I will get back to, I promise you, I will bring back to council, and I will explain that, and I will actually have, hopefully, maybe one of the members from Public Works to come and explain that in the Tabernacle.
Thank you, Councillor Encina. Councillor Noyes?
I very much appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Encina.
Any other questions by members of council? If not, then that takes us to presentations and delegations. And this evening, as we're sitting up here, and I know Councillor Christensen had an opportunity to chat with some of the youth in the audience, you can actually feel the energy. So if this is the kind of energy, Ms. Scott, that you're generating from your competitors, then I can understand why you've been so successful. This evening, we're pleased to recognize the accomplishment of Adeline Pizarnik, who is I guess this is her third year of gymnastics, and she, along with the Fort Erie Fantastic Gymnastics team, participated in the first provincial tour selection gymnastics competition. And I'm pleased to say that during the competition, Adeline nailed the vault. She did a stunning floor routine and also did a near flawless bar routine and was able to win the gold medal for her category in the competition. So she is therefore the first provincial tour selection gymnastics champion. This is all particularly important because to be successful at any level requires a lot of determination and dedication. It also requires the support of your family, and I know that Adeline has received that, as well as those around you, your coaches, and your teammates. And I presume that all of these young ladies are teammates. If there are any young men in there, if they're quite a bit younger, that's good to know because we need a well-rounded team. So yes, this is in every sense of the word a team effort, but the individuals are the ones who ultimately have to face the pressure, face the competition, and succeed on their own merits. So I want to, on behalf of council, and I'll come down and present a certificate to you, Adeline. I want to thank Sarah Scott, Fort Erie Fantastic Gymnastics, Adeline, and all of your teammates for putting Fort Erie on the map in terms of gymnastics. And we look forward to the opportunity in the future for you to do much more in the world of gymnastics. So if you would come forward, I'll present this to you. So Adeline, this is a certificate that says the Municipal Council of the Town of Fort Erie, on behalf of the residents, hereby recognizes and congratulates you for becoming the first provincial tour selection champion in the Level 6 category gymnastics at the Ontario Tour Select Competition. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So let's get some photos here. And I wonder if the coach would like to get in the photo. Yeah, so you come this way. We'll get the coach on that side.
Coach is shorter than the athlete.
Right here.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, have you been to the competition in
Yeah.
Arizona?
Yes.
How'd you make out?
I got 4th overall, and our team got 1st place.
You're kidding. Okay, I'll make that announcement. And that's great because this gives you a platform upon which to build going
Yeah,
forward.
she also just competed yesterday, and yesterday she had her best showing ever, and she actually won every event.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll maybe see you again.
You might be.
I neglected to mention that the Fort Erie Fantastic Gymnastics team competed in Arizona with Team Ontario, and they did very well. They finished first. Adeline finished high up in her competition, and so congratulations to all of you. Now, you're welcome to stay at this meeting as long as you wish, but you're also welcome to leave at any time. The next delegation is Ann Redekop from the Alzheimer's Society. Good evening.
Mayor Redekop, council, city staff, members of the public, my name is Ann Redekop, and I'm the vice chair on the board of directors for the Alzheimer's Society Niagara Foundation. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about dementia, our organization, and a board recruitment campaign we are launching. Dementia doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone, regardless of background, education, lifestyle, or status. Alzheimer's disease, already the 7th leading cause of death in Canada, continues to grow as a public health concern as the number of Canadians with dementia rises dramatically. 1 in every 10 individuals over 65 has dementia. No one is prepared for the impact that dementia has on the whole family. I can guarantee that there are several in this audience that know firsthand and are caring for someone with dementia. In 2020, there were almost 600,000 Canadians living with dementia, and by 2030, we can expect that number to reach almost 1 million individuals. Every day, more than 350 people in Canada develop dementia. This is more than 15 per hour. Niagara has an aging population. In 2021, Fort Erie here had 27.3% of its population over the age of 65. Now, compared to Canada's population, the proportion of seniors is only 19%. According to the Hopkins report, there are 11,750 individuals living with dementia in Niagara. But we know that's probably underestimated, as many residents have not been diagnosed for reasons such as lack of specialized geriatric services, an unwillingness to get diagnosed, and or a denial that cognitive changes are actually happening to oneself or a loved one. It is important for families to access services and the resources that are available. It's a long, difficult journey that families do not have to endure alone. The Alzheimer's Society of Niagara Region is a recognized leader in the field of dementia care. Our vision is a community where individuals with dementia and their care partners are fully supported to maximize their quality of life and well-being. Our service provision includes all individuals that are impacted, spouses, families, children, friends, who also need education and support to facilitate the lifestyle, the health, and wellness changes for their loved one. A physician referral or diagnosis is not required. Anyone concerned with cognitive changes should contact our first link coordinator and speak to them. We provide individual and family counseling, support groups, and a vast array of educational programs for both the person living with dementia and their care partners, separately as well as together. Throughout the region, several social and wellness programs offer a welcoming place where they can access information and support, as well as connect with others who share a similar experience. We have an event calendar for all the times and locations for programs and services throughout the region. As part of Awareness Month, we're also offering various educational forums. Visit our website at alzheimerniagara.ca. Lastly, as a director of the board, I can tell you my own experience as a board member has been rewarding and personally satisfying. I've been a member of the board for over 10 years. The Society does great work in Fort Erie, offering a brainwave cafe and dedicated family support counselor. But we are not represented at the board level. We have no one from Fort Erie on the board. And it would be very nice for Fort Erie to have a local voice on such a critical issue to its community. And now there is an opportunity to remedy this. We have just launched a board recruitment campaign to solicit new members to join either one of the two boards. We have a society governance board, and we have the foundation board. That's the fundraising board. I always say that's a fun board. That's the one I'm on. They get to have parties and things to raise money. So we are looking for new leadership to fulfill our strategic goals to ensure that all Niagara residents living at home with dementia and their families receive support to continue living safely and independently within their community. So all information, including the board applications, can be found on our website at alzheimersniagara.ca. Again, we have several opportunities to get involved. Share your talents, whether you have an experience with healthcare, business, or fundraising. We would love to connect with you. And then on a final note, I have a little bit of homework for everyone. I'd like everybody to be aware of the great strides that have been made in the research and whatnot with respect to Alzheimer's. There's a very interesting book by Dr. Dale Bredesden, and it's called The First Survivors of Alzheimer's. So he's been on the forefront of protocols that help stave off Alzheimer's, as well as help people who have even been diagnosed with Alzheimer's actually reverse symptoms because of certain things that they're ingesting or whatever that is causing the symptoms. And there's also a very interesting scientist, researcher Dr. Rudolph Rudy Tanzi, who has discovered all the genes that relate to Alzheimer's. And with his help, he has a lot of people working on these things, but people who have been sort of preordained to get Alzheimer's because they have a gene, like their parents got it when they were 45. Now there's new treatment protocols that can stave it off. You're not stuck having this disease come upon you if you take some measures ahead of time, and even at the time, they can help you. So if everybody just does a little bit of research, it's very, very interesting, the progress that's been made in the last even year or so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Redekop. Do any members of council have any questions? And so you've indicated that there is the website for anyone who's interested in considering becoming a board member or volunteering, I suppose, in any capacity.
Correct.
Great. Thank you very much for coming out this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, then that takes us to public meetings, and we have a public meeting this evening with respect to the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 557 Walden Boulevard and 0 DiPietro Street. This public meeting follows a process under the Planning Act, and we will have a staff member provide members of council with some background information relative to the application. Council members can then ask any questions that they wish. Thereafter, we will ask the proponent or the proponent's agent to provide any comments to council, and again, we can ask any questions of that individual. Thereafter, I will ask if there's anyone who wishes, other than the owner, to speak in support of the application, and then following that, I will ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak against or ask questions relative to the application. This is a hybrid meeting, so that there is the possibility that individuals can participate digitally. Mr. Patton will be monitoring that, and I will ask him at the appropriate stage if there's anyone who is coming in digitally who wishes to address members of council. Before I finish, I will ask the clerk if there have been any late comments relative to the application that didn't find their way to our council agenda, and thereafter we'll end the public meeting if it is appropriate at that time. So I'm going to start by asking Samantha Young to come forward and provide council with some background information relative to the application. Good evening, Ms. Young.
Good evening, Mayor Redekop and Council. I'm just going to wait for the presentation slides to load. Perfect. Then, okay. Good evening again to council, staff, and residents in the attendance today. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information and recommendation to council for the combined official plan and zoning bylaw amendments applications for the subject lands known as 0 DiPietro Street and 557 Walden Boulevard. The applications were submitted by the agent, Greg Terrace, by Urban and Environmental Management on behalf of the owner, Rachel Stimpsey. The subject lands are proposed to be redesignated and rezoned to a site-specific residential 3 zone to permit the construction of 1 single detached dwelling and 1 semi-detached dwelling. The existing single detached dwelling will be remained on the retained lot after the future consent applications, should these applications be approved tonight. Site-specific provisions were initially requested to recognize a reduced exterior side yard setback of the existing single detached dwelling. After a zoning review, though, planning staff are satisfied that the proposal complies with all of R3 zone provisions, and a site-specific provision is not required. So this slideshow here shows a timeline of the development application process. The proposed planning applications are subject to a 120-day processing and review timeline, where the time begins the day the application is deemed complete and will stop the day council makes a decision on the applications. We are currently at the public meeting and recommendation report stage and day 87 of 120-day timeline. The subject property is located within the urban area boundary and in the Walden Boulevard neighborhood. The subject lands are located at the north corner at the intersection of DiPietro Street, Walden Boulevard, immediately north of Garrison Road in the Walden neighborhood area of the town of Fort Erie. The subject lands are irregularly shaped with an area of 0.21 hectare and approximately 33.8 meters of frontage along Walden Boulevard, and contain a existing single detached dwelling, as shown. The nearest neighborhood parks are within 2 kilometers of the subject lands. Energy Field Park is 1.1 kilometers from the subject lands, and Douglas Park is located 1.8 kilometers from the lands. Surrounding this property, to the north there are more single detached dwellings. To the south there are some commercial buildings. East of the lands, there's commercial and institutional buildings and vacant residential lots. And to the west, there are commercial buildings and draft approved for 18 townhomes at 1101 DiPietro there. Okay, so here is a view of the subject lands looking west from Walden Boulevard. And then here's a view from the corner of DiPietro and Walden Boulevard, looking north. And then this is a view of the rear of the property. It is looking east from DiPietro Street. The subject lands are currently designated as commercial in the town's official plan. The commercial designation permits a range of commercial uses. However, the applicant is proposing to redesignate the lands to urban residential to allow for the proposed residential developments. The urban residential designation is intended for a mixture of housing forms, including single detached and multi-unit dwellings. In this instance, the proposed single detached and semi-detached dwellings are considered low-density residential dwelling types, which will conform with the urban residential designation. I will also note to council, sorry. Sorry. So, I will also note to council and the public that the corner right here where my mouse is circling around, recently council approved for an official plan amendment to redesignate these properties from commercial to urban residential as well. So these are supposed to be yellow. Policy 13.73 of the official plan also contains criteria for council to consider when making amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw. Planning staff's consideration of the criteria are detailed in the staff report. For information purposes, the criteria are what is the need for the proposed use, the extent to which the existing areas in the proposed categories are developed, and the nature and adequacy of such existing development, the physical suitability of the land for such proposed use, and in the case of lands exhibiting or abutting a natural heritage feature, what is the demonstration of compliance with the natural heritage policies of the official plan. There's also criteria with the location of the area under consideration with respect to the adequacy of the existing and proposed highway system in relation to the development, the convenience and accessibility of the site, adequacy of portable water supply, sewage disposal facility, or other municipal services. There's also compatibility of the proposed use with the uses in the area, effects of such proposed use on the surrounding area in respect of the minimizing of any possible depreciating or deteriorating effect on adjacent properties, potential effect of the proposed use on the financial position of the municipality, and the potential effect of the proposed use in relation to the intent and implementation of regulations of the Environmental Protection Act. Okay. From a zoning perspective, the subject lands are currently zoned local commercial, C1 zone in the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw as amended. The C1 zone permits a wide range of commercial uses and dwelling units above a commercial use. The applicant proposes to rezone the lands to residential 3 zone, which permits the proposed single detached and semi-detached dwellings. A conceptual site plan is also provided here. So the R3 zone specifies that the R2A zone requirements will apply to the single detached dwellings. The R2A zone requires a 6-meter setback from the exterior side yard where a detached garage faces the exterior side lot line. The applicant initially requested a site-specific provision to address this and proposed the recognition of 3.13-meter exterior side yard setback from the existing garage that's attached to the dwelling on Part 3. Oh, sorry. Okay. And that would be around the area where my mouse is circling there. However, through a further review by town staff, it was determined that the front lot line is along Walden Boulevard and that the exterior side lot line is along DiPietro Street where the arc begins. Since the attached garage faces the front lot line along Walden Boulevard, it is staff's opinion that the proposal does comply with the zoning bylaw, specifically with the R3 zone and R2A zone, and the proposed site-specific provision is not required. The proposed development, that's kind of a repetition. So it is in compliance with the zoning. The conceptual site plan indicates all zoning regulations under the R3 zone comply with respect to lot area, lot frontage, lot coverage, setbacks, and building height. So a public open house was held in person in the atrium of Town Hall on November 30th. All property members within 120 meters of the subject lands were notified of the meeting by mailed notice on November 16th of 2023. Town planning staff and the agent were in attendance, and 5 members of the public attended the open house. There were no objections to the proposal, but residents wanted clarification on the impact of the development. So some of this included what the design of the dwellings would be like. And the resident adjacent to Part 2, so that's 543 Walden Boulevard, asked if the driveway for the proposed single detached could actually be located on the other side of the property. For the amendment applications, these building renderings and elevations were not prepared. However, the applicant indicated that the proposed dwellings for the single detached will be 2 stories in height, and the owner has agreed to relocate the proposed driveway to the other side closer to Part 3. Their residents also asked what the intent of the existing and proposed dwellings will be and whether they will be used as short-term rentals. In communications with the owner communicated that the intent is to sell the residence to potential home buyers and that there is no intent for short-term or long-term rentals. I will note that short-term rentals may be permitted in the future, subject to the owner obtaining a business license with the town. And then the property owner north of the subject lands inquired about the impacts of stormwater flow from the proposed development. Residents asked if the existing ditches will be maintained with the proposed lots and indicated that they would also like to have their ditch removed and replaced with storm sewer with curb and gutter. The detailed designs for stormwater flows from the proposed lots will be reviewed and approved through a master lot grading and drainage plan, indicating that each lot's drainage will be independent. This submission and approval of the plan is typically addressed through future consent applications and as a condition of consent. I will also note that DiPietro Street is set to be upgraded to a full urban cross-section up to Walden Boulevard intersection. This upgrade will include an extension of the storm sewer along with curb and gutter installation that will outlet to Garrison Road. The owner is requested to provide design and construction of a curb and gutter and the removal of roadside ditches along the frontage of parts 1 and 3 of the conceptual site plan sketch. This will be a condition of the future consent applications. Lastly, there were some concerns with the existing Bell Canada utility line and pole location. Residents indicated the pole is unstable and asked whether if it would be removed and replaced with new underground services. So Bell Canada was circulated for comments on the proposed development, but comments were not received by town staff. I also followed up with Bell Canada after the open house to notify the agency of the concerns discussed at the open house. Bell did acknowledge receipt of these concerns in the email. So they are aware that there are some concerns and we'll be looking at this at a future state. So during the building permit stage, Bell Canada and other utilities will be contacted again for review and determine whether changes are recommended for the existing dwelling and how the new residential dwellings will be serviced. And that concludes my presentation today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Any members of council have any questions with respect to this? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. In regards to the holding provision, due to the sewer, question about the sewer, if this takes a long time, which it may, has the owner commented on that at all, or?
Through your worship to Councillor Noyes, yes, we have had some discussion with the applicant and the owner. We are currently aware that there's some further studies happening with IS Division, and once we collect more information from those studies and provide that information to the town's engineering consultant to include in their model to determine what upgrades are required, then we'll have a better idea of what the timelines will be for those upgrades. So we have communicated this with the agent as well. So as of right now, the timeline is unknown.
Thank you for that. One further question. And you comment about short-term rentals, that this could be possible if a business license is obtained. Are you referring to the short-term rental license?
Yes.
And is this in the area, if the short-term rental that we're approving, hopefully approving today, does this fall within that area that's zoned for this?
Yes. So if the bylaw gets approved tonight, then the subject lands would be permitted to have an occupied short-term rental, owner-occupied short-term rental, provided that they can also obtain a business license for that.
I think you have some, they're owner-occupied, yes, but it has to be owner-occupied. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. Any other members of council? Yeah, so I think what Councillor Noyes was driving at is if the zoning bylaw that's on our agenda this evening is passed, that would provide for R2B zoning, but not R2A. Is that correct?
So this is, if this application also gets approved, it will be approved for R3 zoning. So yes, it would be following under that approval, and that will also be permitted.
There are also, I thought R2A was also for the semi-detached units.
Yes, through your worship, to your worship. The R3 zone references R2A zone regulations, but ultimately the zone that will be amended will be R3. Yes.
Okay. Any other members of council? Thank you very much, Ms. Young. So at this time, we'll hear from the owner or the owner's applicant. Mr. Terrace, I presume you're going to be speaking on her behalf?
Yes, thank you. Your worship, Mayor Redekop, I do have a presentation, but there's really no need for me to go through anything. My colleague, Ms. Young, has covered off everything that I would speak to. I did, though, want to touch on the holding provision. I met with Mr. Johnson and Ms. Young just late last week, and we had the opportunity to discuss the town's current study that's going on. My understanding from that discussion was there would at least be some understanding by the town of whether there was any capacity in very short time. Brad thought maybe weeks, month at most. So what we're hoping is that we could work with staff that if there is a resolution and there is the ability and capacity before the zoning bylaw is actually finally approved, that perhaps we can avoid the holding, that it could be removed before having to go through another process to remove the holding condition. So we're willing to work with staff however that can be best accomplished.
Okay, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And in view of the fact that you're not going to be doing the presentation, if there are any questions that arise by members of the public that I think you can address, we'll ask you to come back if you don't mind.
Certainly, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Terrace. Is there anyone other than the owner who wishes to address council with respect to the application, in support of the application? Mr. Patton, is there anyone in the digital waiting room that has indicated that they would like to address council on this?
Your Worship, there's two people, but they're for another part
Matter?
of the agenda, so
Okay.
that's right now.
Okay, so if there are none, then I would ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or to ask questions of members of the council. Please come forward, ma'am. Good evening, and we need your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Rosemary Morris. I live at 1080 DiPietro Street. So my home is the very first home as you enter DiPietro Street, adjacent to this property. My questions are regarding the drainage issue. Right now, my backyard is a swamp because we get all the rainwater from all the other homes coming down to ours because supposedly our lot was vacant for many, many, many years. And so everybody's kind of directed their water our way. My concern is that if there's not proper drainage put in on these this next construction, it's just going to end up really, really badly saturated in that whole area. And I was trying to, unfortunately, wasn't quite picking up on what the young lady was saying in her address to council when she was describing whether it would be a culvert again or whether there would actually be closed, not quite sure what you call them, when you put the actual sewer system or whatever. Because right now, not only are we getting all the water from the existing homes, we're also getting it backing up on this particular property because there's still nobody living in the one home and nobody cleans the culvert, so it's completely filled with leaves, and it's all backing up as well. That's my one concern. My other concern is if anyone can actually tell me where the driveway will be, because when she was speaking, I thought she was saying the driveway would have to go back onto Walden because the garage faces Walden, but they have actually taken that away and put soil down as if they're going to grass there, and they've moved the garage to the driveway to the side, which is on DiPietro. And so I'm just trying to figure out where that driveway is actually going to end up being, because although it's a quiet neighborhood, that little tiny corner does become, you know, quite a bit of an issue, because DiPietro is a narrow street to begin with. So if you have too many driveways, if we're going to have all these townhouses on the other side, and now we're going to have, you know, too many driveways on this side of DiPietro, you know, it's going to be a nightmare trying to get out of your driveway or get out of the street. You know, because there's not much of a turn from when you come out onto DiPietro, you're right onto Walden and right onto Garrison. So I'm just wondering what the logistics of that whole thing are going to be. And my third concern, and I'll be finished after that, my third concern was that when the previous owners owned the property, the actual property was divided into 5 lots. And now that the new owners have bought it, they want to put the one detached on Walden, and on my side they want to put 2 semis. The semi closest to my house appears to look like it's going to have a decent yard. The semi furthest away from my house looks like it will have next to no yard, and I think it will be a very hard sell for anybody. But more importantly, I wondered why you would stick 2 semis in there when, I mean, up until now the whole area was detached residential, with the exception of across the street being commercial. So now it seems that we're going to get a whole bunch of townhouses stuck in across the street from us. Now we're going to get this misplaced semi stuck in between my home and the large corner existing home. And it just doesn't really, to me, I don't see that it's going to enhance the area at all. So.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right, I do thank you very much, Council. Thank you for your time.
Before you go, your concerns about the
driveway,
about the semis, really are. You know, there's been a number of pieces of legislation from the provincial government trying to encourage construction of more homes within existing urban boundaries. This is one of those occasions where planning departments and municipalities are being encouraged to intensify their development.
Oh, I get that, but there's 5 lots there, but they're putting one onto one, or the one semi onto the one lot, and then they're putting a detached on the other one. So they're still keeping a lot of property for that corner property, and to me it would have been ideal had they put in 4 detached. But just the semi, I think, is going to be totally out of place. And
Mr. Patton can put up Appendix 2 that was part of Ms. Young's presentation, which shows where the driveways are being proposed. And unless Mr. Terrace can indicate otherwise, that's what the plan going forward is in terms of the driveways?
the driveway on the existing home, where is it actually going to be?
On the existing home? Ms. Morris, maybe we can let Mr.
Yeah.
Terrace
Thank you so
speak
very
to
much.
that. Thank you. Yeah. Don't go too far, Ms. Morris, because there may be councillors that may have questions.
So on the existing house, the driveway, oh shoot, what did I touch? Thanks, thank you. The driveway actually wrapped right around. So the driveway started here at Walden, wrapped all the way around to DiPietro. So this was all driveway at one point. So you could come in off Walden, you could come in off DiPietro. The owner has recently removed the driveway that fronts on Walden so that it only enters now off of DiPietro. The other question about driveway, and this may or may not have been, is this driveway here, the owner adjacent to it asked if the driveway could be switched to this side of the lot rather than adjacent to their property. So, and we had no issue with that. It was just conceptually how we showed it at the time. But to the existing, the driveway will only be from DiPietro at this point. So we're putting more of the land into green space, so it'll be sodded and grassed out front, which was previously pavement on that property.
And since you're there, Ms. Terrace, and
Yep.
Ms. Morris's first concern was the drainage, can you comment on the drainage for these newly created lots?
All of these lots will require, there'll be a master drainage plan. Each lot itself will have a drainage plan for it. So there will be further engineering done at the consent stage that will present more detailed drainage plans for these properties. So we'll have to control drainage or this just won't work. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Terrace. Now, do any members of council have any questions of Ms. Morris? Councillor Noyes, could you come forward, Ms. Morris? Go ahead, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Ms. Morris, you mentioned about the drainage problem now that nobody lives in the house, so the culverts aren't cleared and there's just a lot of debris in there.
The new owner has spent a lot of money beautifying the property. She really has. I'm not sure if she's present. Are you, Rachel? No? Yeah, like she spent a lot of money improving the property, don't get me wrong, but unfortunately it's been vacant since they purchased it. And so we're in a very kind of precarious position because we have that vacant home sitting on that corner that in the summertime they came and maintained, but nobody's doing anything about the ditch now, so the water's backing up substantially. And the neighbours have cleared it a couple of times, my husband included. And then, of course, right across on the other side of DiPietro, we have the Benjamin's Balance building that is supposedly full of mold and whatever and supposed to be condemned. And I believe there's squatters in there again because the windows are smashed open again. So we're kind of sitting on the end ourselves and, you know, it's not very comfortable to have these two vacant properties sitting there the whole time with nobody really in them, you know. It would be nice to see something proceed with them, you know.
So it would be helpful for the current owner, whether they live there or not, to make sure that the ditch and the culvert
They
are
have to,
cleared
yes, please, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure the message will get back. Thank
Yeah,
you.
the lady probably just doesn't know it's getting bad because all the leaves have came down and whatever, so it'd be nice if that got done.
Thank you,
That'd be
Councillor
wonderful.
Morris. Any other members of council have any questions of Ms. Morris? Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this application? Mr. Patton, could you see if there's anyone that's raised their hand that would like to address council on this matter? Okay, Mr. Clerk, have we received any communications or correspondence relative to this application since the agenda was prepared?
Your worship, no written comments were received.
Okay, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed, and we're going to move to report PDS 03-2024. Can I have a mover for that? Councillor Flagg. Okay, that item is on the floor for any questions or comments. Councillor Noyes.
Just one question, actually. I think we're looking at an R3 zoning, and I'm just wondering what the lot coverage, I know it's 30, 37, and one of them is 47.5. Do all of that fit within the requirements for an R3? I just noticed one is so much more than the other.
According to the material, yes, but Ms. Young, can you address that, please?
Which use are you looking
It's the one, I think it's the part one, it's the one.
for the semis?
One that's a 47.5% lot coverage.
47.
I might have it's around, it's 47 something. So that's within the,
Yes, so that one is for Part 2, the proposed single detached dwelling. So there is a maximum lot coverage of 50%, and they are coming in with 47.5%.
I couldn't remember the exact, it just was so much different than the other two lots. Thank you.
Any other questions? If there are none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations? None opposed, that is carried. That then takes us to the consent agenda, and can I have a mover for that? Before I do that, Mr. Clerk, you didn't hand out resolutions for any of this, did you? You did. Okay, so does somebody have a resolution for the consent agenda? And before I go there, are there any items that anyone wishes removed from the consent agenda? If not, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 11, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council approves the consent agenda as recommended.
Are there any questions or comments with respect to the minutes or the board committee minutes? Councillor Noyes.
I'm just going to make a general statement because I don't want to pick one BIA over another. But the timing of the reports that come to council, I know it was Christmas and everything, but some of them are dated, the minutes are dated September. And we're, like the last meeting was in September and we're getting it now in January. Is there any way of perhaps, and I don't know, I think the meetings are once a month?
Mr. Clerk, can you give us an indication as to why there would be a delay in our receipt of these minutes?
Thank you, through your worship, to the councillor. I can't speak to each individual BIA, but all I can say is that in regards to the timing, this is kind of when they were provided to us. So we've kind of urged the BIAs to be more forthcoming with their minutes, but sometimes it's difficult to get the information from each committee. So unfortunately, there are some that are further back, but this is when we were provided them.
And I can appreciate these BIAs are run by volunteers, and many times they have a meeting, and then the next meeting they have to approve the minutes of the meeting the month before, and then it goes on and on. But there is a possibility for them. I know someone provided the draft minutes so that if they require some changes, they can still, but we're at least kind of getting an idea of what's going on in the BIA, particularly if there's an area that we can help. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of the recommendations of the consent agenda? That is carried. Excuse me, that takes us then to the development charge, excuse me, the reports and the development charges background study. Is there someone that has that to put on the floor? Councillor Christensen.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott that council receives report CS 13 2023 attached as Appendix 6 regarding the 2023 development charges DC background study, and further that council approves the revised 2023 development charges background study, including the growth-related capital programs and the revised draft bylaw law as described in this report, and further that council determines that no further public meetings are required under Section 12 of the Development Charges Act 1997, and further that council establishes an industrial DC grant program and related reserve, and further that council authorizes staff to prepare the necessary bylaws for consideration and adoption at the February 26th, 2024 council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Christensen. And I understand that the consultant is available digitally. Mr. McQueen? The consultant is available digitally? Okay. So let me know when he's available, and then we'll start in case there's any questions. Okay. Good evening, sir.
Yes, good evening.
So are there any members of council that have any questions or comments with respect to report CS 1301 2023 or the, yeah. Yeah, in the many appendices. Any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I'm somewhat taken back by the amount, the difference between what the town of Fort Erie is going to be charging for development charges in comparison to our other municipalities. I did have a chance, I did read the report, and I do understand that part of this has to do with our loss of other funds from due to Bill 23 and all that kind of stuff, that the government hasn't yet made us whole, and therefore we have to find the funds to cover our costs one way or the other. But if the government does find a way to make us whole like they have promised, what happens then to these charges? I mean, because a lot of it's predicated on the fact that we haven't been made whole by the Ontario government with the changes they made. So what happens if they do?
So, Mr. Jansen, is that something you'd like to tackle?
I'll let Craig take a crack at that first.
Okay. Could you take a crack at it, sir?
Yes. Good evening, and through the mayor to the question. The rates that we've calculated are actually based upon the capital needs and the growth that's anticipated within the town. And there's we haven't really factored in and reduced the rates to reflect revenue losses that would arise from the Bill 23 or associated changes to the Act, because we can't take the costs associated with those exemptions and shift them over to other forms of development. So these rates are really based upon the needs arising from the development. So even if the province changes some of the Bill 23, in particular amendments to the Act, that would not impact on the rates that we've calculated.
Councillor Noyes?
It's a very long report, and there's lots of appendices, so I can't pick out where it is, but it basically, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, that it basically refers to us not being made whole by the Ontario government, and it's in the report, so I'm just connecting the dots here, that I thought that was one of the reasons, but if it's not, okay. The growth anticipated, what happens if the growth doesn't happen?
Sir?
The mayor again, of course, if the growth doesn't happen, you're not going to collect the development charge revenues. Hopefully, the municipality can respond to that by staging or phasing some of the infrastructure needs to slow them off until that development occurs. It's also important to recognize that we do have different rates of development, and presumably when it slows down in some years, it'll pick up later as interest rates begin to fall, likely later in this year. I think the market anticipates that everything will pick up. And so it's a correlation between adjusting your capital needs to the timing and rate of development.
Thank you for that explanation. When I meant that the growth anticipated, like if only part of the development happens and we don't need that increase in infrastructure, in other words, instead of building 100 homes, that they build 20 homes instead. Those 20 homes then are billed at the new rates, so to speak, but yet we're not putting the money, we don't need to put the money in because it hasn't kind of triggered the need for the increased infrastructure. That's kind of where I was going. But in regards to the graph on Appendix 3, when I'm looking at it, it looks like Fort Erie is at the top, or next to the top, for development charges. In comparison, and there's a comparison now from us to the other things, how do we explain that to a developer that, okay, 5 miles down the road, or maybe 10 miles down the road, it's going to cost you this much, but here in Fort Erie it's going to cost you this much?
Yes, just through the mayor once again, some of this has to do with the timing of the updates. Fort Erie is earlier in the timing process for updating the rates. I am aware that several of the other area municipalities in the region will be undertaking updates within the next year and two. And so it just happens that you're in through this first, and other municipalities, when they update, will reflect the increased costs construction costs that have arisen through the pandemic, and the additional infrastructure needs. And so once again, what we've calculated for you are what we see the infrastructure costs associated with your servicing needs and your service levels there in the town. beyond that, can't comment too much more unless Jonathan has anything to add.
Councillor Noyes?
Okay, I don't know if Jonathan's going to chime in on that, but again, I'm looking at the current rate. I'm not even looking at the increase. Our current rate is significantly higher than the current rate of some of the other municipalities. We're, I think, fifth from the top for the current rate. Even before we add any of this stuff in, we're higher. And many of them have updated their reports, and we're still higher, and we're going to get even higher. But I'll leave it at that. I know that's, it is what it is. You also mentioned, we talked, and you did address it, I think Council talked about tiny homes, and I understand, I did talk to Keegan today too. A house is a house is a house. And so the development charges for a house that's small or a house that's big is pretty much, if it's a single detached, it's a single detached, and it does the same. But I saw that in your report, you mentioned that Mississauga is doing it somewhat different. And you had a report in another municipality, can't remember what it was, tried, and that they were taken to task on it, and they had to refer it back. Why can't we do what Mississauga is doing?
Sir?
Yes. I mean, part of the rationale, we tried to explain it in our memo, is that Mississauga, prior to implementing the small unit rate, compiled a significant amount of data to support that and looked at the units that were being constructed, collected information on the size of those units, correlated it with available census data to arrive at the occupancy patterns for these smaller units. And that established a firm basis upon which they could implement that lower reduced rate and make it defensible, recognizing that the bylaws are challengeable to the tribunal. So the end point of our memo was just suggesting it's an option for Fort Erie to look at, and we would recommend that you can start compiling that data and information now, and so that for the next update you could, or even earlier, you could implement that through an amendment process.
Okay, thank you for that. And I think that's something we probably should be looking into, because I know they base it on the size of the house, well, the number of bedrooms, or a single house, 2 bedrooms, 1.2 people or whatever in an apartment building. But again, it doesn't make sense to charge a 700 square foot small house the same as a 24,000 square foot house, simply because it's easy for the province to get that, easier for the province to get that data. And I would imagine the number of large houses will always overwhelm the number of tiny houses. Do you think that the province is ever going to kind of perhaps draw a line and saying, okay, this is a small house, this is a large house, these are the different rates, or recommend different rates, or suggest the municipality do different rates?
Yes, through the mayor again. Certainly, any of my fairly recent discussions with ministry staff in the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, it is not a topic that they are, to the best of my knowledge, are actively considering. Of course, I anticipate in the short order, within the coming months, that the discounts and exemptions for affordable housing and potentially attainable housing will come into fruition. And sort of de facto, that is aimed towards smaller units, because those do tend to, they will tend to come in at those lower threshold points and receive the statutory exemption for affordable housing. But I haven't seen anything that is going to give firm direction on providing reduced or lower rates based on size of units.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? So, Mr. Binning, just maybe to go back to where Councillor Noyes left off, you have provided in the, or at least we've received in the report, the supplementary report, an indication of the preferred option in terms of how we would charge for residential units. And we I think are hearing loud and clear that we shouldn't be differentiating on the basis of size. What about the basis of affordability? In other words, what about the possibility that we identify a class of housing unit that meets the CMHC, or whenever they get it, the provincial definition of affordable, and establish a specific rate for that type of housing? That in itself, one would think, is going to be a smaller unit, and it's going to be probably non-luxury finishes, but something that may be affordable.
Yes, and Mr. Mayor, the work that the province released in November and December with respect to the exemption for affordable units, which is embedded in the legislation but not yet in effect. I thought it was good that they paused because originally it was going to be solely based on value of unit, but specific to municipalities or geographic areas. But what is now being put forward in the legislation is both the value of the units itself, differentiated by type of dwelling unit and by geographic location, and that also now there will be an income test embedded in that as well, which reflects the ability of residents within your community and what their affordability index will be relative to average and median household incomes, significantly based upon the CMHC criteria that you just identified. So I think the direction that they have gone sounds to me similar to what you're proposing. So I would anticipate that those will become formalized, at least my understanding, in the coming months, potentially as early as February, but perhaps a little later in the spring. My suggestion to you would wait to see how that's finalized. And if council feels that they would like to be more aggressive, then it could be embedded through an amendment in the bylaw to provide for additional exemptions and discounts for other units that you feel aren't being captured by the provincial definitions.
So 3 thoughts on that. The first is that Bill 23 was passed many months ago, and we're still waiting for definitions. And so you sound optimistic with respect to this, and you may be correct. I'm not so sure about that. Second of all, I'm not actually speaking about an exemption. I'm speaking about a specific rate. So if the unit is affordable in Fort Erie on the definition of CMHC or any provincial definition, this is the rate. Not the rate that is currently being proposed, but something less than that. And rather than approving this bylaw and then going forward at some point in the future and requesting an amendment to the bylaw, which I understand opens up a process, I would think we would be better advised to try and do that now as opposed to later. We've got a month between now and when this bylaw would come forward, so isn't that something we could work on between now and then?
We could certainly work with staff at structuring some language around that, and that's certainly at council's discretion to provide a reduction in a rate for a particular type of criteria. I do want to stress that the reduction in a rate for any particular dwelling, the revenue loss associated with that cannot be shifted to other dwelling units in terms of higher development charges. Any reduction in a rate for a particular type of dwelling unit based on affordability or size that differentiates from what's been calculated would have to be offset by property tax monies.
So I'm hearing what you're saying, and I agree with the general philosophy of development charges that developers should pay for growth. Part of the problem that I'm having is that much of this is a construct. So all of the 17 pages of projects in the future, some between now and 2050 something or other, we're speculating on A, whether they're going to be needed, B, what the cost might be, and of course those costs will escalate, and C, we're requiring, every time we try to modify these rates, we're requiring the general taxpayer to put money into a fund for projects that may or may not be built. And so I'm not, I hear what you're saying, and I hear that you're saying we couldn't set 2 rates, one for houses of this size and one for houses of a smaller size. Now you're saying that we might be able to set a rate for a house that's affordable, deemed to be affordable by a definition, as opposed to a house that's more costly than affordable. But the general taxpayer would have to pick up some delta between the rate for the non-affordable and the rate for the affordable. Can you help me with how I get over that psychological challenge that I'm faced with? Or am I beyond help?
Well, Mayor, through you, the issue that I just referenced about not being able to take the revenue loss associated with a council discretionary exemption or discount is embedded in the legislation itself. There's a very clear prohibition against shifting the burden arising from a council or municipal decision to reduce the development charges for any particular type of built form. You can't shift it over and recover it against other units. So that it's there in the legislation, and that's been before the tribunal. And so I couldn't recommend it because it would not be defensible under the legislation, in my opinion.
Okay, so if we were to take, as an example, look at the chart and take the amount for development charges for a single-family dwelling and change that at the outset, that is the amount that we're collecting. And I guess if instead of the, whatever it is, $36,000 it's being proposed, it's $30,000, I suppose, technically speaking, when we build the infrastructure down the road, that's going to have to, any difference in what we've collected for development charges and the actual cost is going to have to be picked up by the general taxpayer in any event, correct?
That's correct. And the enhanced reserve fund reporting requirements on the development charge reserve fund would require you to identify that when you actually construct a project, that the non-DC recoverable shares arising from those things are being funded from some other source.
So that if we were to look at a second residential unit for single family and semi-detached, based on affordability definition, we would have to get staff to also give us some advice as to what the impact on that might be. So, would we get 30 new affordable housing units that would be built in the town? And if so, if it's a $15,000 reduction from the other rate, that's the amount of money we'd have to pick up. Is that something that you and staff could work on as well?
Yes, we could. And I would continue to reflect that, everything I'm hearing from the ministry is that the affordable exemption will come through. So statutorily, and I would probably want to also advise you, in our opinion, what share of that, if it was a higher level of affordability than what's being driven or proposed by the province, and they have put forward some numbers now, then we could also advise on that.
If we were to proceed and pass a bylaw that had this second rate for affordable units, and the province did come through with their definition, I presume that the worst that could happen is the provincial provisions would prevail over the local development charges bylaw. Is that correct?
That's correct. Any provincial legislative changes would supersede the bylaw unless there's any transitional rules built into the provincial impact of those changes. But I would anticipate they'd come into effect almost immediately, as did a number of the changes in Bill 23 that are now in force.
Right, so then we would simply have a redundant provision with respect to a particular housing rate.
Correct.
I had some comments with respect to the draft bylaw itself, and I don't know whether you would have had much to do with the preparation of that. But I noticed that in the draft bylaw itself, there's a reference to stacked townhouses. I would think that we would want to keep that out. I also on page 12 of that bylaw, there's a, and you may be able to help, Mr. Binning, it talks about other statutory exemptions and discounts. This is Appendix 1, and it's page 12 that I'm looking at, and I don't know if you have that in front of you or not.
I'm just opening it up.
Okay. I'm just wanting to get an understanding of what Section 3.9 actually says.
So these are the statutory exemptions introduced through Bill 23 for purpose-built rental. Depending upon the size of the unit, their development charges are automatically reduced. So if it's like 39A, if the unit is 3 bedrooms or larger, the development charges that otherwise would be applicable is reduced by 25% per unit, the 2 bedrooms by 20%, and then 1 bedroom and smaller by 15%.
And so here's how I have difficulties with the artificial construct in the world that we're working in here. If you have a 3-bedroom apartment, and I understand and I agree with the province's desire to reduce development charges for purpose-built rental units, but one would think that if you had a 3-bedroom unit, you'd have more people living in it than you would have in a 2-bedroom unit, and yet you're getting a bigger discount, which means you're actually paying less for the services that the development charges are designed to collect money for.
So I think this is really a policy direction from the province, recognizing that they want developers to build larger apartment units in order to achieve the intensification objectives. It would require more families to be living in higher density units, and there's just not that much rental or apartment units that have 3 bedrooms or more. So they're trying to effectively incent it or encourage the developers to construct the larger units.
Yeah, I understand that, and I don't disagree with that. What I find fascinating is that it's somewhat contrary to the philosophy behind the development charges bylaw. That is, if you have a single-family dwelling, you pay a higher rate than you do for a townhouse, on the premise that more people will live in a house than will live in a townhouse, which really isn't necessarily accurate. And maybe the data would suggest that. I suppose that it's, anyways, that's a concern that I have. Do you understand my concern on that regard?
I do, and I mean, I think this is very different, but recognize as well that you do have 2 apartment rates. So you do have the larger apartment rate for the 2-bedroom plus. So when it receives a 25% discount, the rate will still be higher than the charge for the bachelor in 1 bedroom, even when it's discounted. But I do agree with you, and I think the province is intentionally writing that in as a policy objective, even though it's counter to the basic principles of the Development Charges Act.
So that would be, and it's policy that I think this council is concerned about in terms of what kind of housing we can provide to our residents in terms of affordability, and hence my questions about that potential second rate within the residential rating. But I have one other question, but before I go there, can I just confirm with staff that they will work with Mr. Binning and look at the possibility of a affordability defined housing unit for a possible second rate?
Yes.
Okay, so then, Mr. Binning, on page 17, section 11 of the draft bill, draft bylaw, talks about services installed pursuant to the Planning Act. And can you explain what type of circumstance this would be?
Yes, I mean, often when you come through with a servicing plan, within that, there'll be a condition of the developer to construct what is referred to as local services. Sometimes it's very clear cut, like the local road within the subdivision or the sidewalk within it. And what we're saying here, and this is consistent with the Development Charges Act, is they're directly responsible for the construction of that infrastructure, and it's above and beyond what they pay for from development charges, because we're not funding it from development charges.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Binning. I appreciate your comments. Any other members of council? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. We didn't talk about commercial or industrial rates, and I do have some concerns that we're going from 0 industrial rate to, I think, matching it to the commercial rate, which we're almost doubling from $85 to $146.91. I'm just wondering, and I know we had a report from the EDTC in regards to the possible ramifications, the negative ramifications that this may have. I kind of agree with the with the concerns expressed that the rates are so significantly higher than they are now. I mean, again, commercial going from 85 to 146. I don't see these commercial entities, I mean, we want this, they provide jobs, they provide services to our residents, and to see that kind of a jump, I'm wondering if we're basically, putting a nail in that coffin, and they're gonna say, we're not gonna do it anymore, we just can't afford to. We'd love to come there, but we just can't afford your rates. And the same thing with the industrial, are we not, I know we've had, and again, Carolee kind of explained it too in her report, that we've been very successful in the last few years attracting large businesses. I wonder if we would have been successful with the rates that we're recommending. And I do understand that the grant program, but I don't quite understand what that grant program may or may not be, because it really wasn't, I couldn't find that it was really spelled out. So I do have some concerns about those two rates. Too much, too fast. The other thing is, it's hard for me to understand, like somebody who's going to build a new house, that before there's even a shovel in the ground, this year it's going to cost $54,000. And that's not counting all the survey work, the pre-consult charges, et cetera, and the $600 you got to pay for your tree. All those other charges are on top. Before there's a shovel in the ground, they can look at a cost of $54,000 for a single detached house, whether it's 700 square feet or 2,000 square feet. But those are my comments. Thank you.
Mr. Jansen, do you want to comment with respect to the industrial rate, which we currently don't charge? There are some programs for that. What is being proposed going forward?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Councillor. The Appendix 5 does provide some proposals for the industrial DC grant program. It's aligned with the regions. We sought to find alignment there as much as possible. There are some parameters there, how we would bring that forward. That would be brought forward with the bylaw. The goal there is to exempt using the existing rates, but external from the bylaw, those industrial properties that would be otherwise subject to the DC. So it's similar to other grant programs we have that would be fully granted back once they're determined to meet the conditions of being industrial. So it would continue, in a sense, to be an exemption. It's just that we're charging it and granting it back outside of the bylaw.
Councillor Noyes, anything further?
I'm just wondering why, if we're going to give it back, like why collect it if you're going to give it back? I'm missing something here, and I'm not an accountant.
So maybe you could explain, Mr. Jansen, the significance of having it in the bylaw and having an exemption or grant or waiver in the bylaw and having it outside.
Yeah, since last time we brought forward a DC study, certainly there's been a number of legislative changes. One, well, there's a number that impact our desire to not change the bylaw itself and extend the life of it where possible. So one of it is that the bylaw itself can be 10 years now, not 5 years. But anytime you want to make amendments or changes to the bylaw, there's a number of requirements with public meetings. And currently with, although this may change, but with the mandatory rephasing in of rates. So every time we were to make changes to the program, it would require that adjustment to the bylaw. So you're right, it is more administrative. It's us calculating a charge and granting it back, but it's a matter of the town and council having more flexibility and discretion with that program. There's a number of parameters we've included with it, with some capping where we feel council would want the ability to review how much of a financial impact the program annually should have on the town and other taxpayers. Certainly that cap is really truly a guide because council has the ability to decide how much they in any instance would want to exempt or grant, but really that's the main feature is giving council that ability to control that program.
Councillor Noyes?
So, and I can appreciate, I don't quite agree with it, but I can appreciate where it's coming from. So my understanding then is basically the grant program would allow us more flexibility, that if we, I mean, when it's a grant program, we can choose to change it without going through this whole process of development charges. And that may make it easier, but I don't know if I was a person who's going to invest and put a 30,000 square foot industrial building in, that I would be confident that the grant isn't going to change, that I'm going to pay the money and I'm going to get it back, because council can change that.
They're not paying the money. The program won't call for them to pay the money. And once they make the application, their application will be processed on the basis of the program as it exists. So you can't change the program midway through where they are.
But I understand that's the reason that we have the grant program, is that we can change the grant, we can change the criteria, we can change the grant amounts, right?
But not once
So-
the application is made.
Yeah, okay, so I guess, I understand what you're saying, is that the person who's coming would know right up front what's going to be forgiven and what's not going to be forgiven, what grant they're going to get. I still think it's, I don't know, I think it's a lot of money. And are the other municipalities basically doing the same thing? Charging these rates for industrial and then granting it back?
Mr. Jansen, do you know that?
I can't recall off the top what others may be collecting industrial, but in this case, really the alignment was with the Niagara region, because we do deal with both of them with these types of applications. So I know most others certainly exempt industrial development charges in Niagara, and that is quite common. It's just this program, and in terms of the impact it would have on attraction with industry, I think what we're seeing and we're hearing from our regional counterparts is that the program is successful and predictable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of council? If not, then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the recommendations in the report, knowing that we're going to be getting some information about a possible second residential rate. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That takes us then to report PDS 0424, and Councillor Christensen, you again.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lewis, that council approves the draft plan of subdivision for 315 and 0-350 Garrison Road, dated July 10th, 2023, and contained in Appendix 2, subject to the conditions contained in Appendix 4 of Report Number PDS 04-2024, and further that council directs staff to circulate the conditions of draft plan approval in Appendix 4 of Report Number PDS 04-2024 to the applicable agencies in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. When we first spoke on this, we talked about a condition that would have all of the construction traffic coming off Garrison Road and not off of Walden. I looked through this a couple of times and didn't notice that as a condition. Just wondering if we can get a comment on that.
Ms. Dilwaria?
Yes, Your Worship. I believe that condition is there in the vacant land condominium, but to safeguard town's interest, I think we can insert that condition in here.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Ms. Dilwaria, when this first came before council, and I actually thought it was approved some time ago, there was a meeting that I had with you and other members of staff and the developer. Excuse me. I see that it's 36 units. Pretty confident that it wasn't 36 to start. And after the meeting, I'm pretty confident that it was less than 36. How did it get back to 36 or up to 36? Good evening, Mr. Van der Veen.
Yes, so it's my understanding that what was approved for the Planet condominium back in 2022 was for 36 townhouse units. That has remained the same. Site plan control has also been initiated for 36 townhouse units for this development.
So the northeast corner of this development, I'm looking at appendix 3. I'm looking at appendix 3. Pretty sure that there was some variation. I'm confident it wasn't 36 units that were approved. So I've had a bit of a problem with it because this is one of those deals where, as Councillor Luberts would say, it's stuffing 10 pounds of sugar into a 5-pound bag. Ms. Dewari, do you have any recollection of this issue with respect to the number of units?
Your Worship, I'm trying to pull out the report that was approved previously, and I'll be able to confirm how many units were there.
Okay, I'd appreciate it if you would do that. Thanks, Mr. Van der Veen. That's the only issue that I had, was the number of units.
Thank you.
Before you go, are there any other members of council that have any other questions? Then you may have a seat if you wish. And so there was, in December of 2022, an OP and a zoning bylaw amendment. And I don't know what the report was on that. Having any luck, Ms. Delwaria?
There were 35 units, no, I'm sorry.
My recollection is that we were trying to get 3 units out. He only wanted to take 2 units out, and then maybe soft shoot around planning and got 1 unit out. Yeah, 32, I think, was what we were trying to target, because I think it was originally 35. So what is the, there's no timeline on this, is there?
No, there is no time.
So this could be put over for, till the February meeting, February the 12th, I think it is, could it not?
Yes, we can, Your Worship.
Is anybody willing to move that we adjourn this to February the 12th? Councillor Christensen, seconded by Councillor Lewis. Any question with respect to the timing? It's a motion to defer to the 12th of February. All those in favor? That is carried. So we're just looking at some information as to how we got to 36 units.
Yes, Your Worship.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. That then takes us to new business, and Councillor Noyes, you have the first resolution with respect to Heritage Week.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Redekop. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis that the council proclaims February 19th to the 25th, 2024 as Heritage Week.
I think I was supposed to have some type of background information with respect to Heritage Week, and Councillor Dubanow is our representative on the committee, so he's not here to speak to this. And so I'm going to be making some comments at the February 12th meeting, which is prior to February 19th. I know there's some activities that have been arranged. Are there any questions or comments with respect to the resolution? If not, all those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Flagg, you have the next resolution.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whereas on April the 8th, 2024, the town of Fort Erie, I'm sorry, it's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Christensen. Whereas on April 8th, 2024, the town of Fort Erie will be in the path of totality for the solar eclipse, and it is anticipated that the area will receive a large influx of visitors, which may result in the activation of the town's Emergency Operations Center. Now, therefore, be it resolved that in accordance with Section 18.4C of the town's procedural bylaw, Council reschedule the April 8th, 2024 Council and Committee meeting to Tuesday, April 9th, 2024, in preparation of the events resulting from the solar eclipse occurring on Monday, April 8th, 2024.
Any questions or comments? Thank you, Councillor Flagg. All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That takes us then to a response to inquiry, and this was in response to an issue raised by Councillor Noyes. And CAO, how do you want to handle this? Not here. So he knew the question was coming. So this has to do with the charging of each owner of a property, and it comes through Planning and Development Services. Ms. Dilwari, did you want to reference this? Historically, we've read these things into the record. This is now a matter of record since it's written and on the record, but did you want to make any comments, Ms. Dilwari, or would you prefer that I have?
Your
Or
Worship,
Mr. Jennings is here, I
is
see.
here.
So why don't we, Councillor Noyes, why don't we have Mr. Jennings come down and he can maybe speak to this, and then I know you have some questions with respect to it. Good evening, Mr. Jennings.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
So this relates to the process by which AMPS penalty notices are issued and then collected.
That's correct. So my understanding around the issue was our current process is that we issue AMPS penalty notices to all of the property owners on the property. So they would each receive an individual AMPS notice for the full AMPS amount. So the question was raised if that was a fair way of doing that. So the response from staff, they reviewed this, they went back to the original report when the AMPS were instituted back in 2019. And the procedure at that time was that each property owner would receive a separate AMPS ticket or penalty notice. Staff also reached out to some of the neighboring municipalities on their process on issuing the AMPS, and their process was very similar to ours, that each individual property owner did receive a separate ticket or notice. With a notice, once it's done, there is an opportunity to appeal that to a screening officer within 15 days. The screening officer can review the circumstances around the penalty notice, and at that time they can make a decision whether to cancel an AMPS ticket or reduce the fine amounts.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor, through to Mr. Jennings. Mr. Jennings, you and I had a talk about this earlier, and I also had a talk with Jim McCaffrey about this too. Again, so what you're saying is that if 3 people own a property and there's one offense, or like one noise complaint, and the fine is $300, we are going to fine $900 collectively.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councilor, yes, that would be correct.
Okay. I totally disagree with that. I think it should be one fine per offense, and there's all kinds of ways we can do it. We can send one AMPS program. You were going to check to see if you could put more than one person's name on the AMPS ticket or whatever you want to call it. Can you?
Through you, Mayor, to the councilor, that's one of the questions we're going to have to check with our IT department. Right now, we do have a limitation of space on the actual ticket that gets printed. So we would have to look at expanding that form and that field in order to create more space to put more names in.
Again, knowing how great our IT staff is, I don't think that's a huge challenge to create a little bit more space. I just don't feel it's fair. I don't think if 10 people own the property, and there's only one offense, they shouldn't be paying 10 times the fine. And I myself, and I've been on council for a number of years, I didn't know it was like that until somebody actually brought it to my attention saying, my wife and I are both property owners, and we've both got a bill for this amount. And I know that when I was talking, some of the other councils were kind of listening in, saying, well, that's not right. I said, they can't do that. I said, yeah, but that's what they're doing. That is how the bylaw is written. They're not kind of going against the bylaw, but I don't know if that was the intent of the bylaw. And personally, I don't agree with it. And I will probably making a notice of motion that one fine per offense. I don't agree with the, again, I just don't think it's fair. I don't know what the other councillors think of it. But my position is one fine per offense. And again, if, I know Mr. McCaffrey and I were talking, he says, well, who do we fine? I said, well, you send it to all three. And if nobody pays it, it goes on the taxes anyway. So you have that opportunity. You're going to collect it one way or the other. And to say, well, yeah, they can come over here and appeal. There's a charge for the appeal. And if we're going to forgive it anyway, which is pretty much what I've been told, if we're going to forgive it anyway, why charge it?
So that's something that Mr. Jennings doesn't have any control over, and it may be that you should bring a notice of motion with respect to that. Before we leave this, though, I understand the CAO does wish to speak to this.
Thank you, through the mayor. Maybe just to further clarify, the one issue that we have with changing the fines would be that the fee schedule for each fine that may be subject to a charge would also need to be changed. And so there'd be a bit of administrative work to go through all of the charges that we would have in schedules for short form wording. And I think there's some consistency with respect to the provincial courts in the way that the tickets are issued. And so Mr. McCaffrey's recommendation was that we continue to use the hearing and screening process as the mechanism by which those inquiries about multiple tickets be addressed, as opposed to administratively changing all of them. And so that was the option that was put forward, was that we maintain the hearing and screening process as a cleaner process in terms of addressing complaints or concerns with regard to multiple charges being laid against multiple owners.
Councillor Noyes?
I'm not quite sure why we would have to change the fee schedule if we're still sending out, we're putting all the owners on the one ticket. Why would we have to change the fee schedule? We're not going to break 300 into 100s.
CAO?
Through the chair, to Councillor Noyes, I think to Mr. Jennings' point, that is something we'll have to follow up. I don't know that it's just simply an IT fix on the ticket. We probably do need to confirm whether or not the ticket is valid if it's written to more than one person under the ownership. So I think we would need to check that before we would simply say it's just an IT issue, and Mr. Jennings may have something further to add to that.
Mr. Jennings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Staff have looked at the definition of owner, and it does include a single individual, partnerships, corporations, etc. We can verify that with legal staff, but we feel that you could put multiple names or a corporation name on a single ticket. And if I may, I think that Mr. McCaffrey's memo talked about changing the fee structure. If we were going to, say, have multiple owners, you would take that fine amount and divide it across the multiple owners. But if we're not going that route, I don't know if we would have to change all the schedules. That would have to be reviewed as well.
Okay, so that's something that can be done and staff will do?
Yes.
Mr. Noyes?
And I can appreciate it, and I understand too from Mr. McCaffrey, this doesn't happen often, but the new millennials, I think most of them are going to have the houses in both their names, et cetera, et cetera. And I know it doesn't happen often, but I do see that we would be still sending out one amp with everybody's name on it, like one ticket with everybody's name on it, so we wouldn't have to change the fee schedule. So I guess there's some direction then. I don't know if I want to make the motion now until we get more information.
Yeah, that's fine. You can hold off and we'll see what comes back.
Because I think it should be an easy fix, and I know I talked to a few counselors, and no one kind of agreed that charging twice the amount, or 3 times the amount, or 10 times the amount, because there's more than one owner, made a lot of sense when it was just one offense. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll wait to hear further information back from staff then on this issue. That takes us to the next item. I'm sorry, Councillor Christensen. I'm sorry. On this memo.
Oh, yeah, yes, sorry. I just want to say that I'm one of the councillors who supported Councillor Noyes questioning it. I looked at it and thought, what the heck? And then I realized it's very much predicated on an approach that we shouldn't be taking against civil property offenses. It's very much the criminal code. If there's 4 people in a house doing a, what do you call it, home invasion, all 4 get charged because all 4 are criminal. But that's sort of a criminal approach, and I think we're dealing with property offenses here. And so I just...
Yeah, there is a crossover. I mean, these are quasi
Yes,
judicial. They're not strictly civil. They're regulatory offenses in any event. Anything further, Councillor Christensen?
No.
Okay, then that takes us to the memo from TQU, and I see that this needs to be put on the agenda. This needs to be, a motion needs to be put forward on this to receive.
Noyes got it.
Yeah, well, Councillor Noyes has it, so it's just that we receive the memorandum. You have that, Councillor Noyes?
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Christensen. The council receives memorandum tennis court resurfacing for information purposes.
Any questions or comments? So, Councillor Noyes.
I can appreciate where it's coming from, but I don't agree. I think the fact that this council unanimously, if I'm not mistaken, agreed that we need to wait for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan before we decide to go ahead and spend $600,000. I think we need to stick to that and move forward on it, and hopefully the master plan will be completed by I think we're aiming for September, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. That if this year it causes, them to cancel a competition, if it's not safe, I can live with that. I understand there's one competition, it's the Grand Slam Niagara, and it's unfortunate, but again, this should have been coming to us 6 years ago with saying, okay, in the year, in this year that we're going to, not during a budget meeting, that we need $600,000 to fix 5 courts with really little, if any, information at all. And even to date, I have not received a lot of information on where did the price come from. I know I went online, and I don't know the names of the 2 surfaces right now. I know one's a clay, one's another kind of whatever. Rubber band. I don't know the names of the things, but I did look it up. And if my Google search was correct, if you had grass in Toronto, because it was Toronto rates that they were giving, and you wanted to create a clay court or what other surface it was $180,000. And that's from nothing to creating this court. So I don't know where they get the $150,000 per court. I don't know what the condition of the courts are. We haven't had, we're not experts on this. I don't know if anybody in the town is expert. But at this point, we don't even know if we need all these courts. And we don't know if we need the the level of this court. So again, I think we need to stick to our original plan. Hopefully we'll get more information. I think we need to look at the tennis courts. I think we need to look at all of Oaks Park and also look at the building and look at a comprehensive approach to this issue.
Councillor Lewis, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions and I guess some comments too. I'm just trying to think which one I want to start with. I guess the first would be the agreement with the tennis club that was provided to council, which I believe expired almost 10 years ago. It was quite an old document. Is that the most current lease agreement or operating agreement between the municipality and the tennis club? Or is there a newer one that predates or replaces the one that was provided?
Mr. McQueen, can you respond to that?
I'm not sure if there's another member of staff that might have, I know that I thought the existing agreement had only recently expired, but we are under negotiations right now with an operating agreement based on the direction from the land committee. So I don't believe it's that old. I think it was renewed. There was a renewal option in the old agreement that was extended for the second 10-year period, I believe, which would have taken it until more recently, but I don't believe it's 10 years old.
Yeah, it's been until recently. Mr. Walsh, do you have any information on this? Okay. Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. And the only reason I ask that because I noticed it was done in a typewriter, and I know that's not something that's been used in a municipal center in quite a long time. I guess the other question the comment I want to make is I know the money that was used to build the tennis courts that we currently have was money that came through bingo funds that at the time allowed Fort Erie to build a number of facilities and buildings, including at this campus, that currently today would not meet those requirements or even be allowed to do. I'm not 100% sure that I know the answer to this question of whether the tennis courts were built because of the need to have that many and that level of court. But I think it's fair to say that the time in which they were first built was definitely a different financial time for the municipality. And certainly one might say a time where we had a little bit more money than we knew what to possibly do with. I guess my question out of this, and I'm not pleased with this because I do agree with Councillor Noyes. I think this should have been flagged well in advance. I'm not really sure if it's a Parks and Open Space master plan problem, which I think it's partially, or as I've spoken with the CAO about that, or it being more of an asset management issue. But, you know, last year I think, dealt with some lighting, and there was no mention of the tennis courts. There was mention of pickleball courts needing to be built, and that didn't happen, and now all of a sudden the focus has been back on tennis. So I think there's a bit of mixed messaging here. I have not had an opportunity to go out and see the facility. I know there was an open house that I wasn't available for. I think the mayor might have went, but I don't think anyone else from council did. I haven't seen the place in 20, 25 years, so I have really no comment there. I do think it's a large amount of money. I am concerned that it's a large amount of money that is not being looked at, and I say that with some caveats because that might not be a fair statement completely, but I feel like we're going down a path where we don't know where we're trying to go. And I know there's other parts of the facility, there's building, there's washrooms. I'm a bit concerned that we're going to spend another amount of money and then we're going to get down the road to find out that there's another couple of $100,000 that we didn't foresee. And I think that speaks to the need for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which I know staff have heard loud and clear and are working well towards. But I think there is some concern about the lack of asset management and not knowing. It doesn't seem to be part of a larger strategy, and that concerns me. I guess my question that I have, because I too am concerned to spend that amount of money on something without the plan, but I also understand that the money coming from that would be coming out of the Parks Reserve Fund and not coming out of the levy. So originally my way of thinking was, well, if we pause this for this year, that's going to be $600,000 of revenue saved off of the ratepayer, which certainly caught my interest. But I don't believe that's the case in this scenario. So that one's gone. But I guess my question would be, if we hold off on this project completely, do we have any unintended consequences with any other projects that are tied to the Parks and Open Space Master Plan? Because that I do not have an answer to. I don't know if anyone on staff wants to wade into that one, but that is a question that's come to mind.
CAO, do you have any thoughts on that?
So through you to Councillor Lewis, I think there's two issues at play here. One is the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which notionally sets out some direction and vision around how we manage and where we see growth in the community, and putting parks and open space plans in place to address future growth in the community. And I would say there's a number of items on the 24 capital list that would fall under sort of new parks infrastructure, new plans, and new direction based on a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. And the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, which was begun in 2017, and its predecessor, which is still on the books, does outline a number of principles around where parks are and how far they are from subdivisions and other things, principles that have been followed in order to guide the asset management plan. So you've got two things at play in terms of something like the tennis court. There is some asset management requirements to repair some of the blistering and cracks on the court. And so I would say that is more a reflection of an asset management upgrade or replacement. There's the Court 7, which has come up as a question, which is not in public use at the moment. Probably lends itself better to a Parks and Open Space Master Plan, where the use or purpose of that specific court has really been a question mark. And so we've got a combination of both on this project. I do think there are other projects in the 24 capital plan similarly would fall under asset management, like the lighting and the building requirements, which are, quickly approaching an outdated AODA standard. And there's some other major repairs on that building that lend it well to an asset management replacement in 24. So it's a difficult question to say anything is one and not the other, because they're both closely related. So, I would suggest that some of the courts that have shown some wear and tear probably need more attention under an asset management regime, as opposed, and I don't think that would change under a new or updated Parks and Open Space Master Plan. I just think that it would be difficult to separate any of those items that are an asset management one from Parks and Open Space Master Plan, because some of them are town assets that we would want to make those investments into upgrade or replace.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McQueen, for that answer. I guess a couple of things that I just want to bring forward on this one as well. And I believe when I looked through the agreement, and I should have printed it off tonight, and I apologize for not, but I believe the agreement spoke to the tennis club being responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and management of the facility. And I'm a bit confused how, if that is the agreement, and full disclosure, I don't see how they could possibly afford to do it with a membership of 150 per se. But I just don't understand, if that is the case, where we're on the hook for it, on top of the not knowing it was coming until it came up in a budget document. One question I do have, and you've alluded to it, Mr. McQueen, in terms of Court 7. From what I gather, and I could be wrong, with the exception of the 150 members, the courts are predominantly used, with the exception of the one tournament per year. They are used for youth activities or children's learning. of the game of tennis. And I know I learned, and I don't profess to be any tennis player, and probably closer to pickleball than tennis by far. But I learned on a Kinsman asphalt court. I was not looking to become an Olympian, but it certainly served my needs and taught me the game and the skill. And I'm just wondering why, if we're looking at so many courts in such disrepair that have not been brought to council's attention in what seems like a considerable amount of time, why we would not be looking at doing, I don't want to say bare minimum, because I think that downplays the significance of the sport, but why we wouldn't look at doing what needs to be done so that children's activities can continue while we look at the Parks and Open Space Master Plan on the broader need for tennis and tennis activities in the community. And I didn't see any of that in the recent report that's come back from staff, but I would be interested in any comments with respect to that.
Mr. McQueen, did you have any comments at this point?
I'm not sure I've got any specific comments to some of the questions you've raised, since I'm not familiar with what the standards are for the different levels of court, and whether the acrylic court replacement is somewhere in the low to high range in terms of tennis standards, so I apologize for that. Certainly we could get some of that information. In terms of the asset management plan, the town has done a lot of work in the last couple of years updating its asset management plan, as council's likely aware, through new legislation and regulations to ensure that's updated. And I know this is one area where there were some gaps in the asset management plan previously, where there are a number of assets that we've brought online with a better understanding of the condition and replacement schedule of them. And I believe this is one that we knew was on the replacement schedule, just wasn't on the 10-year capital. So there are those gaps that, you know, have come to light, and they've certainly shown up on the capital plan, as you've pointed out. So I don't know if that answered the question, or if there's anything further I can provide.
It certainly is more than before the meeting, and I apologize for not getting to staff with some of the questions beforehand. Now, I guess last question is there a way, since we don't have the answer to the question about resurfacing at a lesser standard, do we still have an opportunity for staff to look into that and get back to us in terms of cost? Because I by no means want to keep activity from residents hostage, but at the same point, this is a considerable amount of money being asked at a 11th hour with no real heads up in terms of knowing that this was on the future, and it certainly wasn't part of last year's budget requests. I guess the question is, where do we go from here?
Mr. McQueen, we have a budget meeting on Wednesday, and I don't know what kind of work can be done or what additional information can be provided based on the questions raised by Councillor Lewis. So why don't we leave it to staff to see whether there's any additional information they can get. I doubt very much that Mr. Hutton's going to be able to get varying amounts based on levels of, unless he's simply told this is what it costs to resurface a tennis court, whether you're playing with youth or whether you've got adults playing in tournaments. I don't know that, but I suppose we've got the meeting Wednesday. Let's see if there's additional information that can come forward then. Anyone else before I go back to Councillor Noyes? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. Just some more comments in that one of the things was that it's $600,000 is coming out of reserves, not out of the tax levy. At some point, that $600,000 came from the taxes, came from the residents. So I would imagine there are probably a number of things on our levy this year that we could use towards reserves. We could take that $600,000 and put it towards other items on the budget and decrease the taxes. Take it out of reserves instead of through the levy. So again, it's 600,000 to 600,000, and in 2 years they want another 250,000. Just remember that. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The other thing too is the clubhouse itself. I had a really brief conversation that the clubhouse itself needs work. And the bathroom is not accessible, does not meet accessible standards. And I also understand that the only people who can use this bathroom are members of the tennis club. And this is not a public tennis club. This is a private tennis club. And we have not heard anything yet about how it's going to be made public.
Well, Councillor Noyes, that's not completely correct. There has been discussion about the agreement and how that becomes more accessible to the public. So that's not completely fair.
Well, it is because we haven't heard anything definite. We haven't had one suggestion come back to us and say, okay, they're going to be public, or four of the 7 courts going to be public, or only one of the 7 courts.
We have, without wishing to be argumentative, we have received information as to the updated agreement. That's been before us. So we have received information as to how that's going to be opened up. We may agree with it or may disagree with it, but that has come forward.
Well, I think it's very general. I don't think there's a lot of specifics in it.
Okay, but that's not no agreement.
But, well, we're still working on an agreement. We really don't know what the context is. The other thing, too, is that we all agreed that we needed a Parks and Open Space Master Plan. What if the demographics have changed? What if they don't? What if when we do go through that process and they're saying we need pickleball, and one out of every 100 people who are there put input, say, yeah, we need a tennis court. Like, we may want to use that space for something else. And that may be what the Parks and Open Space Master Plan will show, that it's more geared towards the population there now is demanding pickleball instead of tennis. There's 7 courts in one area. There's asphalt courts, I think, in every ward. I know, but there's one in Black Creek, there's one in Stevensville, and they seem to be fine, and they seem to be meeting the residents' needs, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing they're asking for is lights, and I was told before by one of the managers of Parks and Open Space, putting lights in is too expensive. So I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. And considering that we have to take care of our assets, I agree 100% we need to take care of assets. I would imagine I can go around this circle, or horseshoe, and all of us can pick an asset from the town that needs attention. I know that I can pick one on Ott Road, in the baseball park. That building needs work. They have not been able to use the fryer or the whatever. They can't cook anything there anymore because public health put a kibosh on it because it was no longer safe. Let's start there. Let's start with fixing the holding tank or whatever was the problem with the sewage. I know we're working towards that.
Okay, Councillor Noyes, you're veering way off of the topic.
Well, again, we're talking about the need for a Parks and Open Space Master Plan to decide where we're going to put the money, whether it's from reserves or taxes. The other thing, too, is do we want a clay surface? I understand talking to Sean that it is a very high-end court, and it requires a lot of maintenance on a weekly basis. And we're fortunate enough now that the tennis club does have an individual who knows how to take care of clay courts. What if something happens to that individual? Is the town then going to have to train somebody and take over that responsibility? Do we need a clay court? I think I'm not sure, but I think there's only 2 clay courts in the Niagara region. We have one, and I think White Oaks has the other. There may be more. But do we need clay courts? Do we need these high-end courts, or can they be replaced with asphalt? And on top of that, the clubhouse itself, can we look at using that clubhouse and expand the services of that clubhouse so the bathroom can be made accessible, and so the baseball players can also use that bathroom when they need to, as opposed to creating another bathroom over here. So where I'm getting at, we need to look at the entire park. We need to look at all of it. We need to see where it all fits, and that's why we need the Parks and Open Space, as opposed to putting a bathroom in for the baseball players, having to renovate the bathroom for the tennis players, and across the street, there's a bathroom going in there, and I'm fully in support of it, at the Sugar Bowl. So I'm just thinking we need to look at comprehensive approach to this situation, not just say because suddenly it shows up $600,000 to do 4 courts, and then in 2 years do another 2 or 5 courts, I don't know how many. But there are things that have been on the budget and for years and years that we still haven't seen. Still waiting for the windows of the lake in Stevensville. That's been on the books for I don't know how long. we can all go through our wards and say, okay, this is a higher priority than 600,000, but we don't have a master plan to say, this is a priority. If I had the residents coming to me and saying, I want tennis, these are the best courts ever.
Councillor Noyes, you've had 2 cracks at this. This is a memo to receive.
Yeah, for
and-
information.
Yeah, so can you move on?
Sure, we can move on. But again, we're doing it for information purposes only. We're not giving them, we're not agreeing to the recommendation in the report, from what I understand.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question and a comment. One is, if we're going to be entering into a new agreement, will that agreement be coming back to council before being ratified?
Yes.
Okay. And the last comment I just wanted to reach, because now I'm going to be Councillor Google, but under the tennis court supply company, which builds these things, they say there is no difference, not so much difference between asphalt tennis courts and those made of acrylic. They are both built almost of the same way, with the same ladder, having the extra cost of acrylic. And because of this, asphalt tennis courts offer very low initial costs and can be more easily installed than other types of courts. And I will email that through to staff because they build them, and that's what their website says.
It's on the internet. Let's
It's
rely
real.
upon it. Okay, so the question is to receive this memo. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Councillor Lewis, you have a resolution with respect to nomination to the Niagara Region's Transportation Steering Committee, which I understand will be working on the region's transportation master plan.
That is my understanding, and I understand that you've volunteered to sit on that, and Councillor Dubanow has agreed that if a replacement is needed, he would be interested in doing that as well.
That'd be great.
And I'm happy to move one that I'm not sitting on. So, agenda number 13.5, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council nominates Mayor Redekop as councillor's representative on Niagara Region's Transportation Strategy Steering Committee.
Questions or comments? All those in favor?
Congratulations.
Thank you. We'll see how quickly Councillor Dubanow gets called into action. Next resolution, Councillor Flagg. This is with respect to the Committee of Adjustment.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Christensen. The council accepts the resignation of Kenneth Burden from the Committee of Adjustment, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance to the procedural bylaws.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. The next resolution is Councillor Christensen.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lewis, that council accepts the resignation of Ellie Hurst from the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Next resolution, Councillor McDermott, relative to the Bridgeburg BIA.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lewis. The council accepts the resignations of William Thomas and Nicole Arundel from the Bridgeburg Station Downtown Business Improvement Area Board of Management, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancies in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Christensen, you have the next one with respect to the Ridgeway BIA.
Moved by Councillor Christensen, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council accepts the resignation of Karen DiBiase from the Ridgeway Business Improvement Area Board of Management, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. And Councillor Christensen, you're obviously the go-to person for items under new business. You have the next resolution.
Moved. Yes, Your Worship. I was beginning to think perhaps I'm typhoid Mary or something.
No, we've got a winning operation here, so why change?
True. moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that council accepts the resignation of Diane Fleming from the Fort Erie Public Library Board, and further that council directs staff to proceed with filling the vacancy in accordance with the procedural bylaw.
Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Are there any other items of new business or inquiries? Then we do have a need to go into closed session briefly. You know, Clerk, every time you update this, my agenda goes back to the beginning. So, sorry. Councillor Noyes, you have the resolution to go into closed session.
Yes, move by myself and seconded by Councillor Christensen. The council goes into closed session at 8:25 p.m. to consider the following: Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee appointments pursuant to Section 239 in brackets 2 and brackets B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and the Fort Erie Public Library appointments pursuant to Section 239 in brackets 2 and brackets B of the Municipal Act 2001, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor of going into closed session? That is carried. rise from closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution number 15, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor
Oh.
Flagg. Am I too anxious? Oh, we don't know. You can lead us in song.
Okay, Councillor Lewis, you may continue, now that Councillor Noyes is here.
Resolution number 15, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Flagg, that council does now rise and reconvene from closed session at 8:41 p.m. with report that council appoints Addison Whiteman and Lincoln Willick to the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee for the term ending November the 14th, 2026, or until their successors are appointed, and that council appoints Samantha McLaren and Stan Sawyer to the Fort Erie Public Library Board for the term ending November the 14th, 2026, or until their successors are appointed.
Samantha McLean. Okay. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. Councillor Dubanow has a motion, but that's been deferred to the February 26th council meeting. Are there any notices of motion this evening? If there are none, then that takes us to consideration of bylaws. I would like bylaws 1 and 2 removed from the package and dealt with separately. Are there any other bylaws that anyone would like dealt with separately? Then, Councillor Flagg, you have the bylaw package, first and second reading?
Correct.
Starting at 3.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that bylaw package containing 3.2024 to deem part of a certain registered plan of subdivision not to be a registered plan of subdivision, 372 Helen Street, Quan Quinn owner, 4 2024 to accept and declare lands as public highway, Ridgeway Road 336, Ridgeway Road. 5 2024 to accept and declare lands as public highway, Lakeview Road 388, Lakeview Road. 6 2024 to provide for interim taxes for the year 2024. 7 2024 to authorize the mayor or acting mayor and the treasurer or deputy treasurer of the corporation of the town of Fort Erie to borrow certain sums to meet expenses for the year 2024. 8 2024 to authorize the entry into the Niagara Gateway Economic Zones and Center Community Improvement Plan 2626 Winger Road, Holland Power Services. 9 2024 to amend fees and charges by law 176-23 building permit fees. 10 2024 to govern the foam and approving authority for the dedicated locators agreements. 11 2024 to authorize the execution of a condominium assumption agreement with the Crystal Beach Estates Inc. Jose Marquez owner. 12 2024 to amend zoning bylaw 129-90 as amended. Town initiated housekeeping amendment is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? None opposed, that is carried. That bylaw package as amended is on the floor for questions or comments. There be, excuse me, Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Just 18.8, I just wanted to make a comment that I think it's wonderful there's another business that's coming into town, and it's also the emergency response vehicle, so it's going to hopefully be helpful to us in more ways than one. And again, give kudos to our Economic Development and Tourism Corporation for their ongoing work. I mean, this has been really phenomenal, that the amount of industry they've been able to attract in the last 5 years. It's really been substantial, and it's wonderful. I want them to know, I'm sure I'm speaking for all of us, how much their work is appreciated.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we go to third and final reading? Sorry, Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a comment or a clarification under 8 2024, the Niagara Gateway Economic Zone. It's indicated that the amount of $380,513 is the base grant program. Just for clarity, that's not entirely on the back of the town of Fort Erie. That is a shared grant with the region, correct?
Who manages this? Mr. Jansen?
Yeah, I believe we reported that based on both the municipal and regional portions, which I think were broken down in the original economic development report.
Councillor Flagg?
I appreciate that clarity. Thank you.
Any other questions before we go to third and final reading? And Mr. Clerk, who has third and final reading? Councillor Noyes? Councillor Noyes, so third and final reading for the bylaw package, less 1 and 2.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis, that bylaws number, gotta change the number here, 3-2024 to 12-20-2024, inclusive, are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Unopposed, that is carried. Back to you, Councillor Flagg, for bylaws 1 and 2, which I would suggest you can deal with together.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor McDermott, that bylaw 1/2024 to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 129-90 as amended with respect to the short-term rental land use study for the town of Fort Erie, and 2-2024 to enact an amendment to the official plan adopted by bylaw 150-06 for the town of Fort Erie Planning Area Amendment 77, short-term rentals, receive first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Those bylaws are on the floor for any questions or comments. Councillor Flagg and then Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know at the last meeting when this was brought forward, there was amendment put forward with respects to lake front properties and so forth. That discussion I felt was a bit hurried here, and after given some time to think about that, I feel that council should take a little bit of time before going through that process too quickly. And I'll hear what other councillors have to say about this before possibly making a motion to defer.
Thank you. Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, I'm going to support this. Again, it may be too quickly for someone who's been here for a year, but someone who's been going over this many years. I think it's come to fruition. I think it was a good compromise in regards to lakefront properties. All of us, I think, was unanimously agreed to the recommendation that we had before us before in regards to lakefront, and we both sides gave a little bit and took a little bit, and I don't feel that opening it up again to start the discussion on lakefront property is the way I would want to go. I mean, I'm not 100% behind short-term rentals, as you guys probably all know, but I think it was a very, very good compromise, and I really don't want to start this ball rolling again. I think we should live with it. I think it's a good plan. I think staff has worked tirelessly trying to capture everything and all the changes that happened. So I'm going to support this, and I probably will not be supporting a deferral. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor McDermott and then Councillor Christensen.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to be supporting this as well. This seems like the gift that goes on forever and forever and forever. And, to say that we haven't debated or taken our time with this has taken years to get to, years. So I think that if we've done anything at all over these discussions is we have given it clear second thought, third thought, fourth thought, and fifth thought. And the thought of doing this all over again, I'm pretty much done with it. I think we've done everything that we can, and we have to kind of hope that everything that we've done and put in place is going to work. And so that's where I stand on this issue.
Councillor Christensen.
I also support the item and would not support deferral. Although I've been here for a year, I witnessed the discussions, I've attended numerous meetings, and I think the information we have received, information from all sides, and I would agree, I think this is a very good compromise. There are issues beyond, I've said this before, far beyond the capacity of municipal councils to deal with short-term rentals. City of Toronto, which has one of the most aggressive short-term rentals, is undergoing some lawsuits because of weaknesses in their process. And even then, they still have problems. I think this is as good as we can do. I think there are other pressures on the provincial government and other senior levels of government to take some leadership on this issue, whether it be the removal of certain types of housing from the long-term rental market, or any of the other issues, the abuses of the facilities and what have you. Many of those municipalities can address. I think this is the best that we can do.
Anyone else? Then Councillor Noyes, you have third and final reading for Bills 1 and 2.
I'm not sure if did count commented something about a deferral or.
Well, just reading the room, I don't know that Councillor Flagg is going to get a seconder if you were to move.
I just want to
That
make sure.
doesn't preclude you from doing that.
Well, I've only been here a year, so I think that maybe I'll just leave you to go and we'll be all set.
Okay, thank you. That move by myself and seconded by Councillor Lewis, that bylaws number 1, 2024, and 2, 2024 inclusive are given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Thank you. And clerk, I'd like a recorded vote on this, please. Any further questions or comments? If not, please proceed, clerk.
Councillor McDermott?
In favor?
Councillor Christensen?
In favor.
Councillor Lewis?
In favor.
Councillor Flagg?
Opposed?
Councillor Noyes?
In favor.
Mayor Redekop?
No. So that is carried. That then takes us to bylaw 13, 2024. Councillor McDermott, you have the resolution for first and second reading of the ratification bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lewis, that bylaw 13-2024 to confirm the actions of council at its council meeting held on December 18th, 2023, and its council and committee meeting held on January 15th, 2024 is given first and second reading.
All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Lewis, you have third and final reading for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Resolution 13, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Flagg, that bylaw 13, 2024 is given third and final reading to be signed by the mayor and the clerk under the corporate seal.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That is unanimous. That takes us to scheduling of meetings. Are there any meetings that anyone wishes to alert us to? Councillor Noyes.
There's an Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow at 4 p.m. in Committee Room 1.
Councillor Christensen.
There is a Planning and Development Services Business Subcommittee meeting on February the 6th at 3:15 in Town Hall. There's also a meeting of the Seniors Advisory Committee on February the 7th at the Douglas Heights Seniors Active Living Center at 10 a.m. And also on February 6th, a meeting of the Ridgeway Business Improvement Association Board of Management at 5:30 p.m. at the Crystal Ridge Library.
Any other meetings that anyone wishes to alert us to? There is an Affordable Housing Committee meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock here in Town Hall. And of course, we have the budget meeting Wednesday evening. Okay, so Councillor Dubanow is not here. I've often wondered what would happen if we ever hit that situation where he's not here and we have to go forward. Now I know that it's simply handed to his left, Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Noyes that council adjourns at 8:55 p.m. to reconvene into a regular meeting of council on February 26, 2023.
All those in favor? Unanimous again. Thank you all.